You see Birth of a Nation, like the week one you're here, and you see things that totally, you just can't believe it. And you're like, what's going on? They actually made this movie? And in the film, you see people in blackface, and you see that all you can see is their eyes and their teeth. Then you go out, and you photograph something, and it comes back, and all you see is eyes and teeth. But in your soul, you're like, damn, that shit look cool. Right? So the battle is, you gotta come in the room and defend a whole history of violence against your folks in that form, and you're worried and you're breaking down the hives because you just want to make sure that you're not reinforcing that. But in your mind, you felt like you actually discovered something.
Hi, welcome to Vibration Cinema, a YouTube channel in desperate search of a tagline. Today we're going to be starting our first channel series, Eyes and Teeth, about what makes a good image of blackness, what constitutes good photography or cinematography of black people and black culture. You can expect a new video in this series every couple of months, but for this introduction, I just want to note that recording this has been an absolute nightmare, and if I don't record it now, it'll never get done. So please excuse any audio interruptions, sirens, dogs, etc. I only have time to do like one take, so we're just going to roll with the punches. Let's go. Around 2013, a social media-based political phenomenon began that turned photos and videos of police officers and vigilantes murdering black people viral. This was done apparently to raise awareness of the fact that black people are disproportionately killed by the police. Despite that awareness having been there for decades now, the recording of these incidents became political praxis to discourage officers from committing such murders, which might have actually been effective if cops couldn't kill citizens with impunity, or if these videos actually led to convictions and consequences. Few police officers have actually been convicted, as in charges brought against them to go stand trial, not necessarily found innocent or guilty, since 2013. These videos have had seemingly little sway on grand juries who are intentionally confused by the DA during these conviction proceedings. The importance of these videos, I think, have been way too overstated given their efficacy, even being called revolutionary acts by radically minded black filmmaker Haile Gerima.
Poor black people making revolution with their cell phone, catching fascist policemen.
The ethics of taking and oversharing these videos is sketchy at best, and I've seen very little discussion on how we've made a political mandate out of the old white supremacist tradition of passing around photos of lynchings and trophies of our murder. Many of the victims' families have been very clear in their uncomfortability at making these deeply painful events into social media flavor of the week hashtags. The mothers of the movement have constantly set boundaries for how we should invoke their children and how often we fail them for clout and institutional access and money. And that seems to be the only thing that these images have been useful for, is getting black grifters corporate sponsorships. The visual ubiquity of black corporeality has had a major impact on modern society. The phrase black bodies rose to popularity in academic and arts circles, impacting language, ideas, and aesthetics. Black bodies is now used often for titles in music and movies, exhibitions, papers, articles, etc. And for a while, back in 2015 to 2018, somewhere around, it's still being used today, but that was like a really high point for it. People were using black bodies in place of black people, which is a little insidious in my opinion. The notion of black corporeality of black bodies seeped into what is considered good black photography in the lighting of the skin. Getting the skin tone correct is literally the bare minimum when photographing any human being, but we've made how the flesh is rendered on screen the primary moniker of quality. If the skin glows, if the melanin pops, then it's all good. When that is the determining factor, an abomination like this happens. This is the July 2020 Viola Davis Vanity Fair cover shot by Dario Calmese. The photo, for those of you who don't know, references the infamous Gordon or whipped Peter medical examination photos of his scourged back published 157 years ago to the month in July 1863 in Harper's Weekly. It's just so callous to me to compare a dark-skinned black woman to a brutalized escaped slave, in the same way that it is as ugly to Peter to have his physical trauma be used as a center point for celebrity culture. And on the cover of such a silly entertainment rag, whose parent company, Condé Nast, was at the time being brought to task by its black and other employees of color for its racist work environment. But Viola Davis does look good here. The lighting, the makeup, the hair, etc. From a technical standpoint, it's a great photo of her. The melanin certainly pops, her body looks amazing, but the image itself is ugly. The messaging is confused and the implementation is offensive. And that to me is the danger of reducing ourselves to merely flesh.
When you see 300 odd pages of one black body after the other, I hope that engenders a response from you. because it's not something that we are used to seeing, right? It's not something that we've had the privilege to view.
Looking back on the past decade, it seems like a bulk of what we have is a record of beautifully lensed black bodies. No minds, no spirits, no hopes, no people, just hunks of black meat decorating a scene. It's wild to me to think about how one of the earliest and longest standing traditions of black photography, which was pioneered in part by Frederick Douglass and Sojourner Truth, was to photograph black people in a manner that expressed our humanity. Ex-slaves producing visual records of their personhood. And yes, there is a level of respectability to this, but it has been a standing tradition throughout the history of black photographic practice.
My brother and I, we were striving all the time to present the community in a good light.
And a lot of the discourse that I see about what makes good black photography reduces us back to chattel, just flesh, blood, and bone. These contemporary image makers, to me, function as woke ethnographers, black people on the outside of blackness looking in to document us like science subjects, but in an empowering way. And this does fly in the face of the history of black photographic practice, from photographers like Jamel Shabazz, Khaliq Allah, Zanella Moholy, to the films of the LA Rebellion and black queer cinema. Black image makers have historically made it a point to engage with their communities, to show respect to those who they photograph, spend time with them, break bread with them, talk to them, and imbue their work with the dignity their subjects, drug addicts, people with AIDS, gang members, the poor, are rarely afforded. Building on the legacy of the Douglas daguerreotypes and the Truth photographs, but evolving from their respectability. It's why portraiture is so important to black photography. Good portraiture requires you to get a feeling of the person you're photographing so you can capture their essence. The time and the care that you give to your subject is more valuable than the image itself. The photograph is just a documentation of how much attention you paid this person. I do want to briefly mention David Hammond's body print series because I think it's a reminder that black corporeality is an amazing and important part of the black artistic tradition. But Hammond's using black bodies in the lowercase as art and instruments of art for a variety of themes, the effects of state violence, sexuality, joie de vivre, artistic experimentation, is vastly different than using black bodies capitalized to be the first black artist at such and such gallery or for such and such publication. And we're hitting upon now what I think is the determining factor in what makes good imaging of black people. But before I hammer that in, I want to switch gears a little bit. If you take a sampling of the tutorials on how to shoot darker skin tones, invariably you'll run across the common sense techniques to make a good photograph of black people. Large, heavily diffused light sources, opening the aperture, slicking up the skin with oils, not getting too close on wider lenses, etc. If you inundate yourself with these how-tos, you come out the other side thinking that you have to trick the camera into seeing black people properly, or that black people are harder to photograph. And I think that this is a very stupid mindset.
And I hate all that ugly blue light. I'm a black girl. You can't put blue lights on black girls.
And these tutorials don't line up with what has become black iconography, with what has pushed the image of blackness forward. I mean, you look at the work of Roy DeCarava or Bradford Young, whose claim to fame is underexposing black people. Hype loves running up on us with a fisheye in our faces. Malik Saeed and Arthur Jafa use harsh and directional lighting on our skin. And these tutorials are not giving what they're supposed to give. You know, they're not up to that level of just amazing photographic stunts. And I do want to note that while Hype, Malik, and Christian Epps did pioneer the use of oil on skin in music videos and on belly, it wasn't as a corrective. It wasn't to make the skin more reflective so it shows up better on the screen. It was used to fantastical ends, as Christian explains in this clip.
So baby oil is the thing, and you gotta know, that is a heightened reality. That was no attempt to make it realistic or look pretty. That's to make it, wow, makes your eyes go zing, 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 right?
I'm just really tired of these conversations about correcting goddamn racism and mechanical imaging of celluloid and those stupid Shirley cards. It's been everywhere since the 2015 Teju Cole article, A True Picture of Black Skin. And people naively think that the algorithms of digital have fixed how cameras engage with black people's skin. It hasn't, and I don't think it should. The racist technology that makes up these digital cameras is also in the CCTV cameras that have difficulty recognizing our faces. And advocating for better camera algorithms is bound up in advocating for the expansion of surveillance technologies. And I think that we as image makers need to recognize the impact of the technology outside of our little creative bubbles and think about how not only our images, but the technology we advocate for and use affect the communities whose who we chose of our own volition to represent. And we have a manufactured scarcity of great black images in this contemporary moment because people are claiming very boldly that because of these advancements in technology, black people are finally able to look beautiful on screen. And it's no shade, but these new black movies that are shot on their post-racial technologies hold no candle to the cinematography of Roderick Young, of Charles Burnett, of James Hinton, of Ernest Dickerson, of Malik Said, of Arthur Jaffa, of Jesse Maple, of Charles Mills, who all shot and got their start on racist celluloid. Correcting the algorithms and updating the Shirley cards are like putting a Band-Aid on a cough, because white supremacy is built into the design and the purpose and the mechanics of the camera. It comes from the race science and the daguerreotypes of Louis Agassiz and the motion studies of Paolo Mantegazza and Stefano Samier, which bridge still and moving photography and lay the groundwork which led us to 24 frames per second. It comes from the imaging of North Africa and South America and East Asia in the travelogue films, which were used to encourage and justify settler colonialism, and in their sister films, the city symphonies, which displayed what these colonizer countries are able to accomplish by overexploiting the third world. Landscapes, cityscapes, establishing shots all descend from these films. And it comes in the form of white nationalism in Birth of a Nation. And in this scene where little sister kills herself as opposed to being touched by Gus, this close-up of her dead face is the most influential shot in history. The key white supremacist line, that white women are angels, are God's most beautiful creatures, helpless and in need of protection, is rendered narratively, thematically, and aesthetically in this shot. The deification of white women is the foundation upon which we consider good lighting. You find it in the cinematography workshops that aren't explicitly about darker skin tones. You find it in film noir, you find it in comedy, in drama, fashion photography, it's everywhere. Photography and cinema are apparatuses of white supremacy and colonialism, and these camera cheat codes to photographing black people take from this colonial history and paints it black. This is why I think some of the most endearing and enduring images of black people are photographed quote-unquote wrong. When the camera is designed in practice to create anti-black images, there can be no way to properly photograph a black person. Gaming the camera only does so much to mitigate that. This conundrum of history creates a problem for black artists. How do you, or more importantly, why would you, make an image of blackness knowing that it'll be anti-black? It's your first and only real assignment at Howard University. How you square this circle is ostensibly the determining factor of if you graduate. But the moment that you think that you've tricked the camera like these common sense tutorials think they're doing, here comes Baba Garima calling you a turkey for not considering how the 180-degree rule, which is the maintenance of the consistency of spatial relations, is a luxury not afforded to black people who have never experienced stable spatial relations because of things like the Atlantic slave trade and gentrification. There is no one approach to solve this conundrum, and all have their own brilliance and inadequacies. For me, I found my answer in Chester Higgins's Elder Grace. There's an undeniable, a palpable love and excitement and joy for black people that oozes out of these images, not just in the photographs themselves, but in the many biographies of the families and the family trees and the legacies that accompany each elder. One of the inadequacies of this line of thinking that I'm still working through, which I want to circle back to on another episode of this series, Eyes and Teeth, is that there's a kind of moralistic tone to the words love and joy. And I fear that leads down a path of respectability, because I do think that images, which can be quote-unquote problematic, can still go hard. And I think the biggest kind of example of this are the video vixens of the 90s and early 2000s. This kind of ensuring your work has a palpable excitement and love for black people, I think also sits adjacent to conversations about respectability, politics, trauma porn, and other ideas of black contemporary photography and cinematography. And finally, another video that I want to do in this series is talk about how understanding the history of colonialism and white supremacy in the medium can lead photographers and artists to become consumed with it and inadvertently center whiteness in their opposition to it in their photography.
In your opening statement here, you have some pretty, pointed and poignant messages. So I'm going to read a little bit from the statement. I often think about what white fun looks like and this notion that black people can't have the same. My work comes from a place of wanting to push back against this lack. I feel an urgency to create a body of images where black people are visualized as free, expressive, effortless, and sensitive.
For me, I think it's a matter of learning it, knowing it intimately, understanding it, and ultimately forgetting it in your practice. So you just do basically whatever you want to do. And we do have a dearth of history to wade through of how our forefigures sat with these contradictions within mechanical image making. And if you follow the work of Deborah Willis, you'll find a genealogy of Black photographers from the 1800s to the present of varying styles and approaches to producing Black images who have worked through this troubled art form.
You're just a mass of images. You've gotten to know.
In this film, I want to challenge these images with what I call reverse anthropology. Make Rouge my informant, myself the investigator.
No matter what anybody says about me, be they near or far or behind your back, I love myself.
And I think that's the point of this video. It's a losing game to be prescriptivist in how you should photograph Black people. But we have many examples in success, in failure, in short-sightedness, in radical imagination to draw from. Blackness is ever malleable and evolving, and so too should the methodologies of how we should image ourselves. This video, and the Eyes and Teeth series generally, are more about prompting Black image makers to think on these things and to draw their own conclusions. But there is a strong tradition from the LA Rebellion to the Kamoingi Workshop to the Sankofa Film and Video Collective that has had conversations like this, which pushed them to excellence. Engaging in community exacerbates talent, and I hope that we can foster an online community here to similar ends. Next time on Dragon Ball Z, we're going to be looking at how Belly uses shadow to sculpt images of Black people, and then the use of harsh light in Sparkle as supplemental videos to my thoughts in this video. And for next month in May, I want to get into music videos as Black cinema, so definitely subscribe if you haven't so you don't miss out. Like, comment, and share. And one last thing before I go, since every channel seems to have their own kind of like nickname for their subscribers, I was thinking about calling you guys the Vibrators. So tell me what you think. Sound off in the comments below.